Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher and not Adam Kaplan. We got Andrew DiCecco pinch hitting once again on Inside the Birds, presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort and in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. You know, last time, Andrew, you were on with us, I believe I called you the Matt Stairs of pinch hitters since you were pinch hitting for Kaplan, but you were so good, we may have to up it. If I were to say you were the Kirk Gibson of pinch hitters, would that resonate with you? You're a younger guy than me. I don't know if that resonates the same way. Does it?
Matt Stairs, the Kirk Gibson. Forgive me to all the listeners out there. That's foreign terrain for me.
No, that's fine. I don't think a lot of people would expect you to remember the 1988 World Series. How old were you in 1988?
I wasn't born yet. I was born
Oh my
'89.
God, I can't believe it. I should have known that, man. Not even born. Wow. Well, Kirk Gibson was a really great player for the Dodgers. And he was really beat up, had a lot of leg injuries by the time the World Series came around. And so he was relegated to being on the bench. And in game one of the 88 World Series, he came off the bench and hits a pinch hit home run to win it for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So it's one of the most classic World Series moments in the history of the game. And he hit it against Dennis Eckersley of Oakland, who was an MVP, who won MVP
Yeah,
as a closer.
that I knew. I
Yeah.
knew. Yeah, so that's high praise for sure, and that's lofty expectations I have to live up to.
Yeah, I don't think it gets better than being the Kirk Gibson of pinch hitters. I can't, I probably think of some good ones, but that one might be the creme de la creme. So we're happy to have you on. We got a lot to talk about. It's a really exciting time for Inside the Birds because myself, Kaplan, and you are all going to be in Indianapolis this week representing Inside the Birds at the NFL Scouting Combine. And that's the first time all three of us have been able to make it out at the same time. So there's not going to be a stone unturned as far as coverage of the combine on Inside the Birds. And you're doing a great job on InsideTheBirds.com. You did your Stay or Go series last week that a lot of people checked out. You'll have more content, so everybody should be reading your stuff, Andrew DiCecco stuff, on InsideTheBirds.com. And also, if you're a sports talk listener, Andrew's going to be appearing on the Fanatic this week, later in the week, to discuss what he's learning at the combine. What time and which show will you be on?
I believe it'll be at 8 a.m., so it'll be on the John Kincaid show. So looking forward to seeing what I'm able to gather and offer up for the appearance.
Yeah, awesome. Shout out to John Kincaid for always. You've been on that show quite a bit. Adam and I have been on, but we appreciate his affinity for Inside the Birds and for your work, Andrew. So really happy that he's going to have you on Thursday morning. So
I'm usually on. I'm usually on at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. All right, great. So we will be out there, and obviously, two-part thing. We get a lot of intel, and we got free agency coming up. We're going to discuss that here in this podcast. And right after free agency, we'll get the knee deep into the NFL draft. All the prospects will be out there. I know that you're looking forward to kind of the full-fledged element of the NFL Combine, the free agency part, getting to know league personnel, coaches, but also the prospects. You get into all the prospects will be out there working out. And we're going to talk about in this episode, Andrew, with you in particular, guys who I don't like to call them risers, right? You and I don't like that level because sometimes guys blow it up at the combine that the casual fan doesn't know about. And then all of a sudden they're getting talked about with either first or high second round, billing, but that's not new to the teams. They usually have these guys rated high anyway, but athletic testing can change it. We'll talk about a few guys last year who tested really well athletically, right? And certainly that helped teams go back, look at them and say, all right, well, this guy might even be more athletic than we thought. It's just that in this system or in this college scheme, you don't get to see it as much. So we'll talk about that, get into it. We've already started previewing free agency with Greg Cosell. The Intel with Greg Cosell season 2 has started. The first one dropped on Friday. We went through free agent defensive backs,
Right.
NFL free agent defensive backs. And then the next one is going to drop later today, Monday. This one will be on free agent edge rushers, which, I don't know if we all thought we were going to be discussing that until the Hassan Reddick situation came up. So now, anything goes there with the Eagles at that position. Andrew, free agent defensive backs, NFL free agent defensive backs. We're going to talk to you about guy. I want to talk to you in this episode about guys who the Eagles have made a lot of hay with in the past, which is the quote unquote value signing. We already with Greg went through L'Jarius Sneeds and all the other big names, the Cameron Curls and things like that. But looking forward to getting your insight on the value signing, which is the guy who may sign a 1 or 2 year deal, right? At a we call it the old Eagles 550K signing bonus, but will actually play a decent role. When you think of some of these guys, the value signings in free agency over the last few years, anyone really just jump out at you like what a great value signing that was?
For the Eagles.
Yeah,
I mean, you looking back to, I guess it was 2016. Rodney McLeod was a really good signing there.
great one.
Malcolm Jenkins, probably the best example in recent Eagles history. I think that, I mean, you could look at Zach Cunningham, although he wasn't in the traditional free agent period time. He was in August, and I think that finding anybody off the scrap heap in August and having them start and play at an adequate level for you is pretty good value there.
100%. And the Eagles for a while had a really good role. Steph Wisniewski is somebody Adam and I talked
Sure.
about on a recent podcast. I mean, the guy signs a 1 year deal, probably was veteran minimum, maybe a little bit more. Was supposed to be a bench guy. By week 2 or week 3, he's starting left guard and then all the way up through the Super Bowl. And then he, 2 years later, he goes to Kansas City, same kind of role, same kind of contract, and all of a sudden he's starting and in the Super Bowl. So really crazy thing for him. But those are good value signings.
Patrick Robinson. Patrick
Patrick
Robinson's another one.
Robinson. Yeah, excellent. That whole year, that 2017 team, Chris Long was a great value signing, right? I mean,
They
they
knocked
have
it out
just
of
a
the
bunch of
park.
guys.
That whole class for pretty much. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who didn't pan out.
Right. Last year, not as good. Greedy Williams, they thought was going to be a value signing. He didn't make the team.
Rashad
Zach Cunningham
Penny.
was. Nick Morrow was. I guess you could say Nick Morrow was a good value signing because he had to start a lot, but certainly not in the Kaiser White territory as far as the impact he gave you.
Yeah, Rashad Penny obviously was a whiff that didn't
Ooh,
work.
real bad.
I mean, they didn't have a whole lot of success bringing in those 1 year prove it deal type of players and trying to patch it together.
Yeah, definitely. I guess Marcus Mariota, you paid him close to $5 million. Not his fault that Jalen Hurts stayed healthy for the most part and didn't play, but man, it's like you spent $5 million on a backup and he probably played like what, 20 snaps, if that, the
If
whole
that.
season. The whole season. Imagine
Yeah,
being Nick
well,
Morrow, right? You signed for zero guaranteed money. You got cut twice, and you have to pretty much play over like 800 snaps for the Eagles. And Marcus Mariota signs for a 1 year, $5 million deal, almost all of it's guaranteed, and he plays like 40 snaps.
yeah, and Nick Morrow took the brunt of it, I think, for the defensive shortcomings. I think he was an easy guy to sort of drag a little bit there.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you on that. All right, so we'll get into a few of those value signings that you're looking forward to this year that you think can really help the Eagles. We did have for our Patreon members, I hope everybody checks out our interview with former Vikings GM Rick Spielman. We talked to him about the combine and what it's like, how GMs prepare, some of the crazier interviews that he's had, how you prepare for free agency. The biggest thing I got out of that with Rick, Andrew, is there's so much going on. Like you're an evaluator, right? You're a GM, you have your staff, you identify guys you want, you know how much money that you have to spend, but like these guys don't know how to do a contract, right? Your cap guy has to be there and then figure out, oh, you want like these 4 free agents? Well, let me go and finagle the books, which it's sort of the under discussed part of how the NFL works and how these contracts are worked to make it work.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what makes this period so interesting and trying to see how teams are able to finagle and what they're going to prioritize and how they're going to allocate their resources.
Absolutely. All right, so check that out on the Patreon platform. Also, this Wednesday, on Wednesday, February 28th, we're going to be doing an Ask ITB live stream live from Indianapolis. Myself, Adam, we might even be able to get you on there, Adam, if you're Andrew, if you're not too busy. So maybe we can do that for
Yeah,
our
let's do it.
Patreon members. Yeah,
That'll
let's
be
do it. I'm
fun.
sure
Yeah.
we can. You say that now, but you haven't. This is your first foray, my friend, It's a lot of work. You-
I know, man. But you know what, man? We're all three of us are there. I think we all offer something different, and I think
yes.
that would be really interesting that have us all three on there and collaborate.
I remember when I was a newspaper reporter and I would go there and my head would just be spinning because you have the GM interview, right? The coach does an interview, the prospects start coming out. You want to talk to them. You don't know whether to be writing like uh, you don't know there's so much immediacy, and especially when I was working at the Wilmington News Journal, Andrew, there was always that crossover element of somebody who played collegiately at the University of Delaware or Delaware State. And if they were brought out on that day that all the other stuff was going on, you'd want to write about them. So there were times I'm looking at my watch or the clock and I'm like, wow, it's 9 o'clock and I'm only through two of the four stories that I have to write and I haven't eaten and I've been inside like an antiseptic conference room all day long, like just these stories aren't getting better, they're just getting longer. So let's just end it right now. Bam, send it. And on to the next
Yes,
one.
I know exactly what you mean.
Good. So, and you're about to find out even more this week. All right. We also want to say hello to our newest Patreon members, Daniel, Vanch, or Vanch. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And Anthony, welcome to the show. If everybody wants to get in, anybody else, it's patreon.com/inside the birds to subscribe. And I mentioned this late in last podcast, so I want to make sure I get this out early now. This week is the start of the Inside the Birds off-season podcast programming, meaning we are 2 podcasts a week, Monday and Thursday. We are not Monday, Wednesday, Friday again until the start of the 2024 season. So that means the next podcast will be myself and Adam will drop Thursday morning at 6 a.m. and then going forward Monday and Thursday. We got to make room for, Intel or Greg Cosell. Andrew's going to do a whole bunch of draft stuff too, I'm sure. So we had to make room for everything else on the platform, and we look forward to that. All right. We got a few nuggets surrounding the team we'll get to in a second. Want to pause real quick to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right, Andrew, the Eagles did us a favor. They did not make us go to the combine, still trying to figure out who in the world was going to be their coaches. They finally unveiled their list of coaches. And on the offensive side, I mean, they had already announced that Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator. And I believe they had already announced that Doug Nussmeier was going to be the quarterback's coach. If not, that's now official, as we've reported and known that Doug Nussmeier worked with Kellen Moore in Dallas and last year in LA as his quarterback's coach. So now he comes to Philadelphia. Have Kellen Moore will travel for Doug Nussmeier. And then an interesting name here, Kyle Valero was named offensive assistant. He has coached also under Kellen Moore in
In
Dallas.
Dallas.
Right, in Dallas, not LA. I'm glad you pointed that out. He was a quality control coach and then an assistant tight ends coach. So you see what's going on here, right? The whole familiarity concept. We knew that he was going to bring some of his guys over. It wasn't going to be full autonomy. We had talked about that with Kingsbury and things like that. So what strikes you sort of about Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, Kyle Valero?
Well, obviously the familiarity, and with Doug Nussmeier, he has a long-standing history of developing quarterbacks. Look no further than the work that he did with Cooper Rush in that stint that he had to start. I thought he did an adequate job being able to perform for that team that had aspirations at that time. So he kept it together. He worked with Alabama. He was offensive coordinator at Alabama, so he has a ton of history there. What was interesting to me, though, Geoff, was retaining Aaron Moorhead and Jason Michael. Both are coaches that I
Mhm.
had a chance to speak to at the Super Bowl. Had a really long conversation with Jason Michael when I was putting together my story for Jack Stoll as sort of someone who was doing things under the radar. And he gave me some good stuff on Dallas Goedert and just the whole tight end room. Aaron Moorhead is really descriptive. You can see that he does a lot of hands-on type of coaching, and bringing those guys back helps from a continuity standpoint. I know a lot of guys like those two coaches in that building. So I think having those guys in the fold moving forward and not having a completely clean slate should be good for continuity.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I'm a big sort of critic often of how easily and how quickly the Eagles run through assistant coaches and the lack of continuity. So I don't know if this was, and I'm going to try to find out this week in Indianapolis, and maybe you will or Adam will. If I do know that Kellen Moore talked to these guys, talking about, we're not going to talk about Jeff Stoutland here. He was staying. It doesn't matter.
He was always staying.
Yeah, that wasn't really the question. The question was Jamal Singleton and Aaron Moorhead. I do know that Kellen Moore spoke to them. So I do then assume out of that, just out of, what do you education guess they call it, that when he interviewed them, he was like, okay, I can work with these guys, or these guys can work with me. We can get on the same page. Do remember, for those listening, it's very, very difficult at this time of the year to find coaches who are not under contract or who can leave. It's easier to get a coordinator that they can go without being blocked, but you're trying to find a receivers coach, a running backs coach. Sometimes you have to go to the college level for that. So it's very difficult. Sometimes guys, they had a coach a couple of years ago from the college level. I can't remember his name. He was a D-backs coach from Houston. He left before he even started.
Jay Valai, yeah,
that's the one.
It was that old GIF where Grandpa Simpson walks in the door, hangs his hat on there, and walks back out.
Walks right back out. Love that. But so it's difficult. So I can understand why Kellen Moore felt that these two guys with their experience. Listen, I don't know if he loves them. He may think I got guys I'll have my eye on down the road, but for now there's continuity. And I think Jamal Singleton's actually done a pretty good job as a running backs coach. It's hard to say on Aaron Moorhead, right? I mean, he's got two of the most talented receivers in the league, and you can talk about how the slot receiver position really didn't develop, but at the same time, the two receivers that he have played really well, and AJ Brown's played better here, statistically at least, than he did in Tennessee. So I always feel like with wide receivers coach in the Eagles, you're always year to year, but Aaron Moorhead's going to wind up sticking around for, I think, a fourth straight year, which is a lot longer than anybody else in the preceding 6 years.
Yeah, the one thing that jumps out about Aaron Moorhead and Jason Michael, while they are very well liked, one thing I'm struck by the lack of development behind the preeminent players that you mentioned. That behind Dallas Goedert, Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra have both had opportunities in the past couple of seasons to step up and start games. They really didn't get much out of them. Albert Aquabenam didn't get much out of him either. Right. And then obviously Quez Watkins, Julio Jones, Olamide Zaccheaus was criminally underutilized this year and misutilized. You just don't see a lot of development, but maybe you get some homegrown talent and develop them in the draft, and maybe you can see what they're able to do. But that's the one thing when you look at them, Jeff, if I'm evaluating them, they have to get better in terms of development.
Is it fair to say Jack Stoll is a decent story development because he was an undrafted free agent and he probably has a very limited ceiling? Like he's given you what he's probably going to be his whole life.
Yeah, that's fair. In college, he wasn't much of a receiver, so you can't ask somebody to be what they're not. And he is a very competent blocker, and he can impact the game in a different way. He doesn't need the football to impact the game. So I think that's fair.
Got it. All right. As far as other offensive moves, very minor. TJ Pagnetti goes to run game specialist and assistant offensive line coach. He was the run game specialist / assistant tight ends coach. So he really just moves positions from tight ends to offensive line and replaces Roy Istvin, the assistant offensive line coach who went on to take the same job in Cleveland. On the defensive side, we already had known and reported about the major additions: defensive line coach Clint Hurt, defensive backs coach Christian Parker, safeties coach Joe Casper. These are three coaches who have worked with Vic Fangio in the past. They did bring in linebackers coach. They confirmed it, Bobby King from Tennessee, I believe.
Yes.
The new announcements were there is going to be another cornerbacks coach named Roy Anderson, who has, of course, from Seattle, right? I think he's worked with Fangio going back to Chicago as well.
And in 2017 and 2018, yes.
Right. So, again, familiarity here. And the Eagles will have, again, three secondary coaches: Christian Parker, Joe Casper, and Roy Anderson. Now, it almost felt like they were going to have 4 because Ronell Williams was the nickelback coach last year. He now moves to assistant linebackers coach and / defensive quality control. So that is sort of like the movement there within the secondary. Ronell Williams is now going to coach linebackers, assistant linebackers coach. So he'll be the assistant to Bobby King. And then Tyler Scudder goes from assistant linebackers coach. Ronell basically takes his job, and Scudder now is defensive quality control coach. And in the newest title I've ever seen, and already people are having a little bit of mockery fun with this, which is they shouldn't. This is not what you think it is. But Tyler Yelk has been called the head coach quality control coach. He was before that the assistant to the head coach. And if you think assistant to the head coach is a menial job that basically is a nothing job, I like to remind people that Brett Veach, his career started as the assistant to the head coach for Andy Reid, and now he is a 3-time Super Bowl champion general manager.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Everybody has to start somewhere.
Right. So the whole head coach quality control thing, I've heard people say, well, geez, Nick's so like ridiculous on the sideline that he needs his own quality control. No, I don't think his job is now to be the Dom DeSandro on the court. Like he has to step in, and the quality control is basically a special projects type of job. So if Nick, wants something done in advance, some kind of project, usually involves analytics or scouting advance, then this person, Tyler Yelk, gets the responsibility. It could also be in the offseason write-ups on players. I know Brett Veach was asked to do for Andy, write-ups on players. Give me your scouting report. Show me what you got. And that's how he worked his way up Andy Reid's totem pole chain until he eventually got to, general manager.
Yeah, they can mock the title, but he is going to have a vital role. It's going to be obviously behind the scenes, but it's going to be very, like you said, detail oriented, week to week, advanced scouting, advanced, different reporting. So, and then this is a name that no one's even going to hear or talk about throughout the season. It's only being discussed now because the name were just revealed.
Yeah, no, they're gonna lose like 2 straight games, and Nick's gonna have an outburst, and then someone's gonna call into a radio station and be like, oh, "I can't believe he's got a head coach, quality control coach, and he still can't keep his emotions in check."
Yeah, that's coming.
Yeah, I don't think something tells me Tyler Yelk will never reach the legendary status of Dom DeSandro, though, unless he does become a 3-time Super Bowl champion general manager himself. Even so, who do you think is more popular, Dom or Brett Veach? Like, if both of them were walking down a street in Philadelphia, it would definitely be Dom, right?
Dom, yeah. Dom has his own sweatshirts. I mean, come on.
That is true. I walked out of my gym the other day. Somebody's walking in, and they're wearing a free Dom sweatshirt. And I've known Dom for 15 years now, and I see him all the time. And it's like just weird to see somebody like and then all of a sudden he's on a sweatshirt. Like it'd be like if somebody was wearing an Andrew DiCecco sweatshirt. Free DiCecco.
and I am free, and so is Dom, as far as I know.
He is free. He is. All right, good stuff. Let's get into some of the value free agents that we can talk about. First, I want to remind everybody, whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you do all 3. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you're going to love, delivered right to your door. So you've resolved to actually sit down and eat dinner around the table. What do you do about those nights when your schedule is jam-packed? You turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, which includes their 15-minute recipes. Those are designed to help minimize mealtime stress. That's the kind of meals that we love. Every time we eat something from HelloFresh, whether it's a quick and easy or one of their other varieties, we are blown away by the freshness, the taste, and the overall quality. We've tried so many great options, seafood options, meat options, chicken, vegetarian options. They've got everything. And now they've got one of the best deals you'll ever find. If you go to HelloFresh.com/EaglesFree and use the code EaglesFree, you get free breakfast for life. That's 1 breakfast item per box while you have an active subscription. Free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/EaglesFree, and you use the code EaglesFree, EAGLESFREE, 1 word, lowercase. Use the code ACT NOW for America's #1 meal kit. All right. So, Andrew, as we look at areas the Eagles need to upgrade, cornerback, safety, wide receiver, backup quarterback, right? Running back, depending on what happens there. Let's start with the secondary. This has been a place you mentioned Patrick Robinson, right? Rodney McLeod, even Malcolm. I'm glad you brought up Malcolm because even though he signed a bigger deal, like a multi-million-dollar deal, everybody remembers that was the year everybody wanted Jarius Byrd. He signed a
And TJ
huge deal.
Ward and
And
TJ
TJ
Ward.
Ward, great memory on that. Both Oregon guys, by the way, right?
Yeah, yeah, good
Yeah, how
call.
about that? Malcolm signed a smaller deal, but emerged as a team leader and a Super Bowl champion and outplayed that initial contract. So even though it was a bigger contract than your, Nick Morrow 1 year, no guaranteed money type deal, it was a great value deal. And so is Rodney's because you got two starters who played at a really good level and helped the team win a Super Bowl. How about this year? Is there anybody that you can think of in the secondary that you feel would be a good value signing, short-term signing?
Well, before those, and I know you, Adam, and Greg discussed Cam Curl. He, to me, would be the quintessential fit for the Eagles. He turns 25 on March 3rd, and the way it was put to me is that he is the ultimate coach on the field, which is exactly what the Eagles need. Very smart, high IQ player.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if they're able to make that work, and I think in most years he probably would command a high price tag, but he's sort of overshadowed a little bit with some of the bigger names. But right now, for value safeties, let's say Geno Stone from the Ravens had a really big season. They have to determine whether or not that was an Anthony Harris type season where
Yeah.
you rack up all those interceptions, or if it's a sign of things to come. And I also like Jordan Fuller, maybe even more, the safety from the Rams. In the second season, Jeff, he wore the green dot. Now, I think Ernest Jones wore it since then, but I think that speaks to his IQ and his command and understanding of the defense. So he, to me, is an ascending player, going to be 26, I believe, when free agency starts. So that to me looks just like the kind of player the Eagles would target. And then those are two safeties that I kind of pinpointed as names maybe to watch.
Is Fuller the kid from Ohio State?
Yeah,
He was like a day 3 pick, was he
yeah, he
not?
was exactly
I just
sixth
can't
round.
believe how quickly the time has flown that he's already an unrestricted free agent. I remember when being at the combine when he was there 4 years ago now. And I was at his podium just listening to him. Ohio State, I think that was the year 4 years ago. Were they in the Final Four that year? They may have been with it wouldn't have been with Stroud. It would have been who came before Stroud? Haskins? No, I
No,
don't.
that was
There was probably somebody in between them who I'm just not thinking of right
yeah,
now. Oh, Fields, right? Justin Fields.
Justin Fields. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I just remember being at Fuller's podium and thinking in an interview, he really came off like a very intelligent player, and would probably be one of these day 3 guys that probably had a advantage to make the team over a day 3 guy from maybe a smaller school or who didn't play under the bright lights of the horseshoe all the time. He seemed to have his stuff together. So that's a really good one. What do you like
it
about
kind of reminds me another Ohio State former Eagle way back, late round pick, Kirk Coleman. Kirk Coleman was a smart player, and he made
Yes.
up for a lot of his athletic shortcomings with his football intelligence and his physicality and things like that. Now, I think Jordan Fuller is a better player, but to me, if you're looking at a player further down the list that might, match up with what the Eagles are looking for, Jordan Fuller to me is a player that I really liked. He had a good game against the Eagles when they played out in L.A. So yeah, he's done a lot of good things in his brief career.
Props to Lester Snead because that guy has hit on a lot of day 2 and day 3 guys in his time with the LA Rams. Everybody they were kind of a joke 2 years ago, like, oh, you sold your soul to win the Super Bowl, you traded all those picks, and then them picks became kind of not cool. It became like you're stupid for that, and then they went in last year and hit on a bunch of dates. Puka Nacua,
Oh yeah,
Byron Young, right?
yep,
The linebacker, somebody
yeah,
else
yeah.
too.
And by the way, Puka Nacua trains with Britton Covey.
Oh, how about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Nice,
It's a
nice.
little interesting nugget there.
Let's see. Nakua went to what? BYU?
Yes.
Right. And Covey went to
Yeah,
Utah.
yeah. I think Covey went to Utah.
Right. A little out west kind of guys. All right. Good stuff. So those were some safeties. Any corners that sort of you look at and you think that would be a good value? I don't know if the Eagles are going to go the 1 year route. I mean, I think we
That's
both
what I
agree they
mean.
got to
I
go.
think
Yeah.
I think that they've tried to bring in outside talent. They've traded for corners. I think right now they really need to develop in-house talent. Remember, Isaiah Rodgers is coming back. He would kind of count as a free agent addition, and you need to get one in the draft in day one or day two. And I think build it that way. Darius Slay's still around. I don't know about James Bradbury or what his future holds, but I think they have enough there, and you have to grab one of those guys in the early the early rounds of the draft and really develop that way. I don't know that the free agent route would be the way to go for the cornerback position. And then if I'm looking at linebacker, which they need, and they're not willing to really spend, you look further down that list. The name that I've always liked is Blake Cashman. He went to the University of Minnesota. Super athletic, was with the Jets. He got banged up, never really lived up to expectations. Went to the Texans, did some good things there. Athletically, I mean, that kind of matches up with what the Eagles look for, and the price point is exactly what they're looking for, I would imagine. So that would be a name to maybe keep an eye on there.
Yeah. So this would be, he's got 4 years in. You're right. He was with the Jets. Did they release him after a couple of years? Was it? He was with the Jets for 3 years. So then, yeah, I guess he didn't make the team, and then he went over to Houston. Actually had five and a half sacks, or no, 5 sacks the last 2 years in Houston. So a couple of passes defended. He had 106. Last year was clearly his breakout year with 106 tackles, playing in a pretty good aggressive defense there from D'Amico Ryan. So you've nailed this as far as this is sort of what the Eagles look for, right? The guy who's coming off a good, like Nick Morrow had the 100 tackles a year. He's 6'1", 237. So he's a little bit bigger, right, than what the Eagles have typically looked like. But do you think with the Vic Fangio system that they'll probably be looking for a little bit more of a thumper?
Yeah, but I would think that would come towards the draft. But I mean, and I know Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has gotten a lot of love, and rightfully so. But there's a lot of players that I have rated even ahead of him that I think would probably be, when you look at that in those 50s, the picks in the 50s there. I mean, Peyton Wilson is arguably the most athletic linebacker in this class. I like Trevin Wallace from Kentucky is my favorite linebacker, I think. So I think that would be the way to go. Maybe if you want to re-sign someone like a Zach Cunningham as your third or fourth linebacker, you have Nakobe Dean there. But I think too often the Eagles have been overly reliant on going the free agent route and bringing in players like that are, some of them, let's face it, are marginal talents versus going through the draft and getting somebody that's going to be a long-term piece for your future.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see what they do at linebacker as far as specs on a guy, because typically, like I think Cashman was good for the Texans because Matt Burke is their defensive coordinator, and he's from the Washburn school of Y9 4-3 front. I mean, I don't know if the Texans played a pure 4-3. Burke came from the Dolphins, where I think they did some 3-4, but I think he likes to have a little bit bigger of a linebacker. Vic has had Fangio has had some big linebacker, Roquan Davis, right? Of course, we know that he had Fitzgerald and not Fitzgerald. We know he had Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman in San Francisco.
I was a big Navarro Bowman guy, man. And I know you were too, being at your alma mater. But I mean, man, TJ Edwards would be the prototype for a Vic Fangio linebacker, man.
He really would. He really would. That's the shame of it. All right. Anybody else outside of we just did corner? I'm sorry, we did safety, linebacker. Don't think it's going to happen at corner. What about wide receiver? If we go over to offensive side, any kind of veteran or value guy you see out there?
Well, one, I think that they should re-sign Olamide Zaccheaus and bring in some familiarity there, because there's nothing behind AJ and Devontae. But looking outside, Geoff, I would look at Noah Brown, and I know that's a name that you and Adam mentioned. Obviously, there's familiarity there with Kellen Moore. He spent 4 seasons really, but didn't play all 4. He was hurt 1 year. But big body guy, 2 back-to-back 550 receiving yards. And so I think that would be a pretty cost-effective option. I know there are some of the belief that he might cost a little bit more. I don't think so. I mean, he's had injury history, and he's been sort of a sporadic player. But I think what the Eagles need, I think he'd be a really good complement for AJ and Devontae, and that bigger body to sort of work the middle of the field.
Is he more of an outs? I remember with Dallas, right? He played on the outside, and CeeDee Lamb played inside a lot. When he left, they started to move CeeDee from inside to outside a little bit more. in Houston, I would imagine he played the outside.
Yeah, he can do both, but I think he's most effective outside. But he can do both, and I think that they also need to look at the draft for that. But another name is Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson, the familiarity is there as well. He's someone that has inside outside versatility. I mean, I don't know that they're going to spend a lot of money at the position because they
Mhm.
have so many other positions of need that take priority. But that if you're looking for a cost effective route that's not going to be prohibitive, those are two names that when you look at familiarity and you look at price point, that to me matches up. And then for the draft, I would expect a day 3 edition, and then Britton Covey's there as well. So I would imagine you're going to see sort of a competition for that role. I don't know that anybody's just going to be handed it per
Yeah.
se.
So two things. One, back to Noah Brown, 6'2", 215 to me does not sort of it screams number 3 receiver. I'm sure he could be good, but then you would have to then play him mostly outside and then maybe move either Devontae Smith inside or even AJ Brown can move inside at certain times. You don't want to do that too much with those guys. However, now that I just get my brain going, maybe Kellen Moore sees Devontae Smith, especially as someone with his long stride, the way CD Lamb's a long strider. They're not built the same way. Obviously, CD Lamb's bigger and well, everybody's bigger than Devontae Smith, but maybe he does see more impact from Devontae Smith in a inside outside role as opposed to just an outside role.
Well, that's what I think that with Kellen Moore comes different ideas and creativity. And Devontae is someone who can play inside, he can play outside. He hasn't really been utilized in that fashion. And I think you're going to see more of that under Kellen Moore in this new regime here. So
Mm.
that's something to keep an eye on as well. So that's why you could see a bigger bodied guy like that who offers outside versatility. We can kick Devontae inside and open up some more, some different varieties and looks.
Yeah. And I want to get your opinion on Britton Covey. My gut and sense of covering the league for many years tells me that it's going to be very, very difficult for a 5'9" guy. What was he? 175 pounds? Like,
175, yeah.
yeah, to be like playing the slot 65, playing any position on the field 65% of the time. But what I don't think the Eagles did well with him, which they could, and I'll see if you agree, is getting the ball in his hands the way Ray McLeod for the 49ers, or even when he was with the Steelers, sort of that gadget guy. I hate to call them gadget or gimmicks because they're so prevalent now in the league, but doing that, jet sweeps, orbit motion, screens, like you can get this guy the ball 6 or 7 times a game and make use of that short area quickness and the burst that he has without just lining him up as a slot receiver and say, go win.
Yeah, and I know for a fact he has a lot of support in that building. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on throughout the offseason. I agree with you. And I heard you say Ray McLeod, I think it was a couple podcasts ago. And that's spot on to me. I don't know that he can be a volume player, someone that's going to play 65% of the snaps, like you said, but there's no reason why he can't see more of a role and carve out a role on the offense. I think his short area quickness, his burst, he offers a different dimension than any of the other receivers have there. And yeah, he might not open the season as the slot receiver, but I do think that his versatility and his dynamic traits warrant a larger look this summer because he really hasn't gotten one. Last summer, he had a hamstring injury. So I think
Mhm.
that sort of hampered him a little bit and he sort of became an afterthought. But this year, I think that he does deserve an opportunity to at least vie for a larger role.
Yeah, another guy who comes to mind is the kid in Jacksonville. Man, he had a touchdown against, or he should have had a touchdown against the Eagles a couple of years ago, but Lawrence didn't see him and then turned the ball over. Who am I thinking? Agnew.
Oh, Jamal Agnew, yeah.
Yeah, another guy who again has no true position, but put the ball in his hands. Things happen, you know.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to give Britton Covey that many snaps because it may impact his effectiveness as a returner, given his size and
Good point.
things like that. But like I said, I do think that he deserves an opportunity for more snaps because he has something different to bring to the table.
Yeah. By the way, how many snaps? I just looked it up. How many snaps do you think Agnew has had? Well, he was hurt a little bit last year. He only played 11 games, but 2 years ago he made the Pro Bowl because he was as a returner, I believe. But how many times do you think he touched the ball on offense?
All season,
Yeah, on offense.
I would say 15.
15 all year long? No, it's
Yeah,
35 touches in 2022. But that's really just 2 touches a game. So, I mean, I think you could
yeah.
do that to Covey, right?
Well, when you presented that question, I'm like, it's probably some minuscule number here that I'm going to go way over. But I thought that he was underutilized, and you
Yeah.
could make the argument that he was.
Yeah, very much. All right, good stuff there. Anybody at quarterback, if they don't bring back Marcus Mariota, that you think would be a
Mhm.
good
Tyler
long-term
Huntley.
value?
Tyler Huntley. He played in 20 games, 9 starts. 26 years old, has a lot of experience. I mean, to me, I think you're going to look for experience. You're going to look for someone who's not going to break the bank like Marcus Mariota did, because they're not going to be able to pony up that kind of money this year given their circumstances. So I think Tyler Huntley, Pro Bowl, who made the Pro Bowl, by the way, I think he would be somebody to target. If you want to go, the bargain bin route in the truest form, maybe an Easton Stick, who was with Kellen Moore last season, and his numbers don't look great. And obviously, but I think that he has done under difficult circumstances, has performed decent, as you would expect a 6th or 7th round pick Preston to duty to do, but he does have that experience. And then you're going to have those guys compete with Tanner McKee. It all depends on where he's at as well. But knowing the Eagles, knowing their Super Bowl window is still cracked open, I don't know that they would be so inclined to turn the keys over to Tanner McKee in his second season.
Yeah, good point on Stick. You look at the numbers. He started 4 games for Herbert last year. At the end of the year, two things that jump out to me. One, he threw 174 passes. He was picked off once. That's a pretty good interception rate right there. So he was good and careful with the ball, which you need your backup quarterback especially to do. But he was sacked 14 times. So he was holding on to the ball a little bit too long.
Absolutely.
In some of those situations. But you have him working. If you have him in that system for a second year, maybe you get something better out of that. And I don't think he turned the ball. I don't think he fumbled that much either. So it seemed like I'm trying to look and see. Oh, no, he did. He had 5. So he had 5 fumbles in those 4 starts. So he wasn't throwing picks, but he was not secure with the ball and he was holding on to it too long, which when you're forced into that situation, I don't even remember. I'm sure the Chiefs were one of those teams that he probably had to face at the end of the year.
Yeah,
So, but
and
yeah.
so I think maybe it may perhaps another year with Doug Nussmeier as your quarterbacks coach and Kellen Moore may serve him well. It's maybe something to consider.
All right, let's finish off our discussion with the combine. We're going to get to some guys that we call quote unquote risers because they test so well athletically and they kind of come out of nowhere. We'll do that in a second. First, we're going to pause to hear a word from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter makes sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You will get a great deal. So when you think of risers, right? Again, we reemphasize that these are not players who, NFL teams didn't know about or had like day 3 grades on, then all of a sudden tore it up at the combine and now they're first rounders. They're guys who are on radars, but you just don't always get a chance to see the great athletic traits of a player on tape because they could be playing a different position. You might move from D tackle to edge, or you work out at a different spot at the Senior Bowl, and your athletic traits can either shine through or they could not be there when people thought they were there. There are certainly people who have hurt themselves by not testing well at the combine. When I think about last year's one, Andrew, this was fun because I think we made a bet on this, and you have to settle up at some point. Kalijah Cansey from Pitt just tore it up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he tore up the athletic testing. And I'm like, this guy's he'll be a first rounder. And, again, teams liked him. I think he was probably top 50. Right. But then it was like, okay, we see a lot here. And he wound up going, I think, 19th overall.
Yeah. And you texted me. You said, I told you. And
you didn't think he was going to go.
I was salty. I was salty about that one. But we'll settle up in Indy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. How about Will McDonald, right? Iowa State defensive end, edge player who I don't know how many how familiar people were with the Iowa State program. It's not like Michigan or Ohio State or Florida State. But he was a
Right.
good player there. But he really blew it up at the combine, and he wound up going 15th, I think, to the Jets last
He
year.
went, yeah, I was just going to say 15th.
Yeah. So let's before that, give me like some of your favorite quote unquote risers, their athletic tester combine stories.
Jalen Wright. I think Wright from Tennessee, the running back.
Mm-hmm.
He was explosive this year and really dynamic player. And when you look at this conglomerate of running backs, there's not really, they're all sort of grouped together. There hasn't been really one that stands apart from the other ones. Bucky Irving's another player I really like. But when I look at Wright, I think he has a chance to elevate his stock depending on how he runs, depending on how he does in his position drills.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer Rattler, the quarterback, is someone who's had a very turbulent up and down in terms of productivity on the football field. And depending on how he does from a throwing perspective, had a really nice Senior Bowl. Let's see if he's able to build off of that and showcase what he's able to do in the combine and carry that momentum forward. He's someone that I think could make some noise, and I think the league may view him more in a higher regard than maybe the outsiders do.
Oh, I think at this point, just based on very early feedback, I think Spencer Rattler is no doubt a top 50 guy.
I mean, I would think so, but there's some that would be that wouldn't believe it if we said that. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. But I think what some might not believe, but that might happen, is bottom round one. Maybe. I mean, that's the reason you do it is if the 5 others are gone, right? We're talking about Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Caleb Williams, of course, and then Bo Nix and Michael Penix, right? If they're gone and a team wants a quarterback, the big thing on the first round is getting that 5th-year option. And if teams see, I think people forget that Spencer Rattler was like the guy at Oklahoma before it became Caleb Williams, right?
Sure.
And then those two, Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, went to USC, and Rattler had then transferred to South Carolina, which I don't think has a very good offensive line. Have a nice wide receiver, right? What's the guy's name? Xavier Leggett, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah,
like, there's a couple other receivers, Jeff, that I sort of think can help their stock. Roman Wilson, the wide receiver from Michigan, he's built in the slot variety at 5'10", 185, but I think position drills are going to be key for him. He has that short area quickness, but you want to see it out there. You want to get some eyes on him and see how he runs, see how he tests. But he's a pro-ready guy. Plug him in the slot. Javon Baker from UCF is another player that I really like. He's very smooth, good route runner, strong hands, inside-outside versatility. He's a name that many aren't really talking about right now.
Yeah.
But he's someone that I think, you look at high second round. I think depending on how he performs, he can elevate his stock there. Ricky Pearsall from Florida is another one, had a really good Senior Bowl, had a big season. You want to see if you're able to parlay that Senior Bowl success into the combine, or was that an aberration, right? Those are certain things that you want to see if you meet the eye test. And those are 3 wide receivers that I think we'll be talking about at the end of the week.
Is there a guy, whether he's, you've already mentioned, or a small school guy or whatever, who's going to blaze like a 4.28, 4.29, 4.3 40 that nobody knows about, but you know about him because you're Andrew DiCecco?
Off the top of my head, no. Nowadays, whenever I say, "Hey, do you have a goal? What you want to run?" A lot of folks are they like to keep it under wraps because they don't like to put the number out there.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this: I think Dylan Laube from the running back from New Hampshire is gonna perform well. And right now, I think he would fall anywhere from where the Eagles pick it was at 97.
Is that the projected 3rd rounder? That
yes, projected, yeah, and then right where they pick next at like 150 or something like that. I think he's going to fall right in there. They need a running back. He'd be a good complementary piece. He can line up in the slot, and he's a mismatch against linebackers. I'm interested to see what he's able to do and showcase at the combine as well.
Why do I feel like Dylan Laube, there's going to be a day 3, maybe day 2 or 3, Dylan Laube sweepstakes for teams that run Shanahan style Shanahan / McVay style offenses.
I'm
right?
Right
they're
there
going to
with
look
you.
at him and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, we're going to use him like the Swiss Army knife running back."
I'm right there with you. There's players every year that you're like, "Wait, he went day 2." And like, 'cause teams, it only takes one team, as you know, and I think he's someone that's going to be valued by a team quite like that. They can use him as a Swiss Army knife, a chess piece, and he could be a mismatch. So that's a name that I really like. Devondre Sweat. How about that? The defensive lineman from Texas, 6'4". He was like 360, but he did not weigh in at the Senior Bowl,
Hmm.
which was peculiar. So I think that's one thing you want to keep an eye on here at the combine. How does he look like he's in shape? Is he able to, does he move well? Is he able to prove that he can be more than an early down lineman, which right now is what many project him to be? I think he's someone that's not really getting discussed and sort of being, brushed to the side a little bit. But I think after the combine, depending where, for good or bad, depending on how he weighs in or how he tests, that's a name that you're going to be hearing a lot more about as well.
Can the Eagles have another 360-pound zero technique who tests through the roof athletically? That would be almost unfair, I would think.
Yeah, I don't think the Eagles would be interested in someone like that, considering what they already have in Jalen
Right.
Carter and Jordan Davis. But I'm curious to see, because I believe he was the only player that did not weigh in at the Senior Bowl. So there's going to be a lot of question marks as to how he's going to return for the combine and what kind of shape he's going to be in.
Well, I mean, if you're 360, right? If you weigh in at 360, you and you want to be like a high pick, you better test like a Jordan Davis, or else you're going to be looked at as a day 3 run stuffer, right?
A
You know,
Ted
yeah.
Washington, a Ted Washington type player.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Remember the guy for the Packers? The enormous Ruben.
Grady Jackson,
No, it was even before that in the 90s. You might have been
Gilbert,
very young.
Gilbert,
Yes.
Gilbert Jones. Is that right?
Gilbert, that's what it was. Gilbert, yes. That guy was enormous. I
Yeah.
remember you would always see him with the face mask thing on, getting the air, right?
Running backs just disappeared under him when they got the
Oh my
carry.
God. Yes. Oh man. Gilbert Brown, that was his name. Yeah.
Gilbert Brown.
He was probably close to 400 at one point, I would have to think. So
And Vince Wilfork too. I mean, that's a name that everyone can remember.
that guy was a mountain of a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a name. Devondre Sweat. I want to see what he's able to do at the combine as well. So he can go up or down depending. So I think that he could be a riser, because I assume that if you don't weigh in at the Senior Bowl, you know that you're not where you need to be, right?
Yeah.
So that's something you have. You bought yourself a few weeks to get right for the combine, and you're gonna have to test through the roof.
Yep. 100%. All right. Anybody else you want to mention before we close it out?
Last one for you, Cam Hart. Well, I have another one. I have one more, but
Okay.
Cam Hart, the corner from Notre Dame, had a good Senior Bowl. I think that he's sort of sitting around the 3rd round projection right now, but I think he can climb into round 2. I like his skill set. He's a longer
Okay.
player. So that's a name to look at. Bo Braid, the safety from Maryland. I'm going to be at his pro day on March 29th. That's a
Okay.
player that I think will carry into the 2nd round. But I want to see how he runs, because he's kind of built a little bit like Sidney Brown, but he's more athletic. But at least the eye test tells me that he is. But I want to see what he's able to do when he's being timed and poked and prodded throughout the week. High IQ player. Is he more of a straight line guy, or does he have some fluidity? That's what I need to find out and see based on how he does how he tests in some of the cone drills and things like that. But that's a name that I'm definitely want to see more of, and that's why I'm going to Maryland to get a closer look.
How's our boy from Rutgers, Max Melton, is he a testing guy, or is he just a really good player who's going to be okay, but not going to like blow up any categories?
Oh, I think he'll hold his own. I don't know that he's
Okay.
going to blow the doors off or be like a top 3 guy at his position, but he's going to hold his own. He's someone that, I mean, you look at a plug and play slot guy.
Yeah.
That's someone that you need.
Yeah.
If you're in need of a slot, he's a guy that I think the Eagles should be taking a look at. Depending on how they feel about Isaiah Rodgers, I don't know, like, if they want to invest in another slot corner, but they need to
Well,
get outside help too.
the draft happens before OTA, so you kind of don't know with that. You're just gonna have to draft the
That's the
best
problem.
players, right? And if Isaiah Rodgers is good and Max Melton's good, that's okay. You're playing a lot of dime these days. You can get 4 corners on the field. You can make guys hybrid players, but you can't not take a
And
really good corner because of him.
Isaiah Rodgers plays on the outside. He's played
Right.
on the outside more than he's played in the slot. He can do it, but he's only played a handful of snaps by comparison. But look, the more good players that they're able to bring in at that position, the better. Max Melton's a really good player, one of my favorite players in this in this class, very confident guy, which is a trait that you need, an intangible that I should say that you need to play that position at a high level. There's a lot to. This is a deep cornerback class, Jeff. So this is a good time for the Eagles to grab one.
Yeah,
Or
good time
two.
for the Eagles to be better. You know what, Andrew? It's been 22 years for the Eagles to be a good time for them to draft a cornerback somewhere high in the draft and actually then develop him and hit on him. Okay. It's
Yeah.
been a really long time for that. So, yeah, there's an expression in scouting: you grade the player, not the helmet, which is a way of saying just because a guy went to this school or that school and they've either done well or haven't done well, you're not supposed to take that into account. But when we start talking about Notre Dame players, I know Joker's done well for the Browns at linebacker, but there have been a lot of guys coming out that just have not floated the boat. I gotta say,
Well, I want to hear your opinion on Cam Hart when you get some eyes on him in Indy.
okay, we will do that. All right, last thing, we'll close it out. Daniel Jeremiah, I thought this was really interesting. I wanted to bring this up. In his latest mock draft, it might have been his first mock draft, the one he just did. Is it for either way? He mocked to the Eagles at 22 the Missouri cornerback Ennis Rakestraw Jr. And I specifically wanted to get your Rakestraw, right? Your thoughts, because in your 1.0 Eagles mock draft, you also mocked Ennis Rakestraw Jr. to the Eagles. However, you did it in the second round.
Second round,
right? Which is possible. I mean, he's in that late first, early second. It's all the same.
And this is a big week for him.
Mm-hmm.
Because it could go, he could vault himself into the back end of that first round. He's a really good player. And when you look at the headline type players at that position, you don't really hear his name much. Now you are, because he was in Jeremiah's mock draft, but really lengthy player, physical, fluid. I think he could have better ball production. That may scare some teams off. He gets his hand on some footballs, but you would like to see more in the turnover department.
Mm-hmm.
But man, he's a guy that I would love to interview and get to know a little bit there and see what the football IQ and see what makes him tick. Because man, when you turn the tape on him, he's a playmaker, and the Eagles need more of that on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, that defense with him and with Darius Robinson, who's a fast rising, as they say, defensive lineman who had a really good Senior Bowl. Got to give a lot of credit to the coach there, Elijah Drinkwitz has done a really nice job keeping Missouri very competitive. I think Missouri was like 10-3, if I'm not mistaken. They had a pretty good year in the SEC. Please don't check me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that they did fairly well this year, and he seems to be doing a pretty good job there. So, all right, good defense stuff. Good discussion, Andrew. And are you ready to go? You ready for your first combine?
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited to get out there, see what it's like. I know there's going to be a lot of things going on, so I'm excited to tackle it.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to having you out there. And then, of course, our next podcast, myself and Adam Kaplan will be back dropping a podcast Thursday morning live from Indianapolis. And again, for our Patreon members, that Ask ITB live stream on Wednesday live from Indianapolis. By the way, you're the luckiest guy in the world, because if you look at the weather report in Indianapolis, it's going to be in like the low 60s or mid 60s. Actually, one day it's going to be high 60s. The lowest it's going to be in the day is like upper 50s. I'm used to going to Indianapolis when it's like 3 below with -10 wind chill. The snow and ice is hitting you sideways. You have to wear like the ski mask hat and then the button up coat and everything like that. For you to go and if to be in the 50s to the 60s, upper 60s is just ridiculous, to be honest with you.
DiCecco season, man.
Yeah, I guess so. DiCecco season.
I don't know.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. Big thanks to you, Andrew, for stepping in for Adam Kaplan. And as always, we thank all of our listeners for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation.